The first letter arrived on a Tuesday in September, slipped through the mail slot of the house on Maple Street in Trinidad, Colorado, and Miriam Castillo found it on the floor when she came downstairs at 6 in the morning to make coffee she wouldn't drink. She recognized the handwriting before she recognized anything else about it. She did not know whose handwriting it was. She had never seen it before, but she recognized its quality. Careful, deliberate, the kind of handwriting that belongs to a person who takes the act of writing seriously. She turned the envelope over. No return address. Her name on the front, in that careful hand. Miriam Castillo. Not Mrs. Castillo, not the Castillo family, just her name, as if the writer knew she was alone now. She set it on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. She made her coffee. She drank half of it standing at the window, looking at the backyard where her husband Ernesto had built a wooden bench 18 years ago, and where the bench now sat quietly in the September morning, like a piece of furniture from a life she no longer lived. She picked up the envelope. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she put it unopened in the drawer beside the refrigerator, where she kept things she didn't know what to do with. Ernesto Castillo had died 11 months before, on a Wednesday evening in October, of a heart attack that arrived without warning and left without explanation. He had been 60 years old. He had been healthy, or what passed for healthy. He walked every morning. He ate the things Miriam put in front of him. He had his checkups. The doctor had said afterward that these things happen, that some cardiac events are simply not preventable, that there had been no warning signs they could have caught. Miriam had nodded at all of this. She had thanked the doctor. She had gone home and sat in the kitchen for a very long time, and then she had begun the process of learning how to be a person in a world that no longer contained Ernesto. She had been a school teacher for 31 years, 4th grade at Primero Elementary, 12 miles north of Trinidad. She loved teaching with the uncomplicated directness of someone who has found the right work. She had gone back 2 weeks after Ernesto died, because the classroom was the one place where the world still made sense, where there were things to do and children who needed her to do them, where the grief could sit in the back of the room and wait while she taught long division. She was 61 years old. She had been with Ernesto since she was 23. She did not know who she was without him. Not in the dramatic sense, not in the way of someone who had lost themselves. She knew who she was. She simply could not imagine any of it mattering to anyone besides herself. The second letter arrived 3 weeks after the first. Same handwriting, same absence of return address. She put it in the drawer without looking at it longer than a moment. The third letter arrived in November. By then, the drawer had 2 letters in it, and when she added the third, she noticed, without deciding to notice, that the envelopes were slightly different sizes, as if the writer was using whatever was available, as if the letters were written in different places or at different times. She closed the drawer. The man who was writing the letters was named Arthur Ngozi. He was 63 years old and had moved to Trinidad from Houston, Texas, 8 months after his own wife died. A woman named Grace, who had been his companion for 35 years, and whose absence had left him in the condition that serious loss always produces. Not broken, exactly, but reconfigured. Changed at the structural level, in ways that didn't show from the outside. He had come to Trinidad because his daughter lived there with her family, and because Houston, without Grace in it, felt like a city he no longer spoke the language of. He had retired from civil engineering the previous year. He had time, and time, he was learning, was the most complicated gift grief could give you. He had met Miriam once, at a neighbor's dinner the previous August, 6 weeks after he arrived. She had been quiet, in the way of people who are managing something large and have learned to manage it without troubling others. She had said perhaps 4 sentences the whole evening. He had learned from the host, afterward, that she had lost her husband less than a year before. He had not forgotten her. Not in a romantic way. Not at first. In the way that one person recognizes another person's particular quality of loss. He had seen it, and it had stayed with him, and he had done something he could not entirely explain to himself. He had started writing to her. Not love letters, not appeals, just Letters. Observations. The kind of things he would have said to Grace across the dinner table. What the mountains looked like that morning. What he had read. A memory of something ordinary that had turned out not to be ordinary at all. He wrote the way he would have talked if there had been someone to talk to. He knew she was not reading them. He had seen her, twice, at the post office and at the grocery store on Commercial Street, and both times she had nodded with the careful politeness of someone who did not want to be asked how she was doing. And he had nodded back and said nothing, because he understood that politeness was not invitation. He kept writing. The letters continued through the winter and into the spring. Miriam's drawer filled slowly. She counted them once, without opening any. 14 letters by March, and then closed the drawer again and did not count again. Her daughter Elena called from Denver every Sunday. Her son Marco came for Christmas and cooked for 3 days and left the freezer full of food and his eyes full of worry. Her colleague at school, a woman named Bia, who had been teaching second grade for 25 years and who understood grief the way long-tenured teachers understand most things, practically, without sentimentality, brought her coffee sometimes and sat with her in the break room and said nothing, which was exactly right. Miriam was not, as she would have said herself, falling apart. She was doing what needed doing. She taught her fourth graders long division and the water cycle and how to write a paragraph with a topic sentence and supporting details. She went to church on Sundays. She tended the garden, though she let Ernesto's bench stay exactly where it was and did not move it or the memory attached to it. But something in her had gone very still. Not quiet. She had always been a quiet person. Still in the way of water that has stopped moving. She was waiting, without knowing what she was waiting for, in the suspended way of someone who has reached the end of one understanding of their life and has not yet begun the next one. The 22nd letter arrived on a Monday morning in September, exactly 3 years to the week after the first one. Miriam found it on the floor of the hall, the same place the first one had landed, in the same September morning light. She picked it up. She looked at the handwriting, which she knew as well now as any handwriting she had encountered in 31 years of reading children's work. She did not put it in the drawer. She did not know why. She could not have said what was different about this morning. The light was the same, the coffee maker was running, the bench was in the backyard in the same position. But something had shifted overnight, the way things sometimes shift in sleep, invisibly, so that you wake up carrying a slightly different weight than the one you lay down with. She sat at the kitchen table. She opened the letter. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are listening to this story from. If HeartLine Stories has moved you today, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Every subscriber tells us to keep bringing stories like this. Now, back to Miriam and what 3 years of unread letters contained. The 22nd letter was 4 paragraphs. It described a morning walk Arthur had taken along the Purgatoire River, the way the cottonwoods were beginning to turn, the specific gold they made against the Red Rock Canyon walls, the way the light came in low in September and made everything look like it was being seen for the last time and the first time simultaneously. It did not mention her. It did not ask for anything. It was simply the letter of a person sharing something beautiful with someone they wished was there. She read it twice. Then she went to the drawer. She took out all 21 letters, and she sat at the kitchen table and she read them in order, from the 1st to the 21st. And the morning moved around her. The coffee went cold, the light shifted, the neighborhood outside the window went through its weekday rhythms of cars starting, children leaving for school, and she sat and read. The letters were not love letters. They were something rarer. They were the record of a mind paying attention to the world and choosing to share what it found with someone who might understand. He wrote about books he was reading and disagreed with. He wrote about a conversation he'd overheard at the hardware store that had made him think about his father. He wrote about the particular loneliness of cooking a meal for one when you had cooked for two for 35 years, the way you automatically made too much and then stood in front of the refrigerator deciding what to do with the rest of it. He had written about grace. Not constantly, not obsessively, but honestly, the way you mention a person who is real to you, who is present in your life, even in their absence. He had written about missing her. He had written about the strange guilt of finding a morning beautiful without her in it. Miriam understood this completely. She understood it the way you understand something that has been true of you for a long time, but that you have not had language for. Reading his words about grace was like reading about Ernesto, not the specific details, but the specific shape of the missing. She sat for a long time after the last letter. Then she went to the small desk in the living room where Ernesto had kept the household bills, which was now the place where she kept the things that mattered to her, and she took out a piece of paper and she wrote a letter. She wrote, "Dear Arthur, I have read all 22 of your letters this morning. I am sorry it took me 3 years. I did not know until today that I was ready, and I am not sure I can explain what ready means, except that this morning I opened the letter before I put the coffee on, and then I sat down and read the rest of them, and now I am writing back, which is also something I have not done in a long time. I do not have anything beautiful to report from my morning yet, but I looked at the bench in the backyard, the one my husband built, and I thought that it is a good bench, and that it deserves to be sat on by more than one person. If you would like to take a walk sometime along the Purgatoire and show me the cottonwoods, I think I would like that. Miriam." She walked to his daughter's house. She knew which house it was, in the way you know things in a small town, and she put the letter in the mailbox. Arthur found it that afternoon. He read it standing in the driveway in the September light, and he read it twice, and then he stood for a moment, with the letter in his hand, looking at the mountains. He called his daughter inside and said, in a voice that surprised her, because it was lighter than his voice had been in a long time, "I'm going for a walk. I might be a while." They walked the Purgatoire Trail 2 days later, both of them slow, both of them careful, both of them carrying something that had grown lighter overnight without fully disappearing. They walked for 2 hours and talked about their spouses and their children and their different versions of Trinidad, and what it felt like to build a life in a place that had been someone else's first. They said goodbye at the trailhead. Arthur said, "Same time next week?" He said it the way you say something when you already know the answer, but you want to give the other person room to arrive at it themselves. "Same time next week," Miriam said. That was the beginning. Not a dramatic beginning, not the kind that announces itself. The kind that you look back on years later and realize was the moment, even though it felt at the time like simply two people walking beside a river in September. Ernesto's bench was still in the backyard. It always would be. That was not the kind of love that makes room for itself by displacing something else. It was the kind that finds the space that was always there, waiting to be recognized. Miriam had thought, for 3 years, that what she was protecting by not opening those letters was Ernesto. She understood now that what she had actually been protecting was herself, from the vulnerability of being known again, of mattering to someone again, of having the world contain her in it the way it had when Ernesto was alive. The letters had waited. Arthur had waited. The cottonwoods had turned gold every September without her, and this September they turned gold with her watching. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was, in the particular mathematics of second chances, everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that grief is not a door that closes, but a room you learn to carry, and that love does not ask you to leave that room, only to open a window, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. A gentle note: if you or someone you love is moving through grief that feels like it has stopped the world entirely, that stillness is real, and it deserves real support. Grief support groups, counselors, and communities exist in most towns and cities, and reaching out is not a betrayal of the person you lost. It is something they would have wanted. And if you have a story of your own, write to us at heartlinestories4@gmail.com. Every heart has a story worth telling. This is HeartLine Stories, where yours matters.